Spider-Man, Spider-Man. Let's talk about Spider-Man. Here's my rambling review of the 2002 Spider-Man from Sam Raimi, starring Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. A classic now. I mean, it's been 18 years, which is hard to believe it's been this long, and how much has changed, right? With the superhero genre. I mean, it is a genre right now. There's a superhero movie every week, seemingly. It's a highly respected and revered and enjoyed genre by all, but they weren't in as huge supply back then. And it is kind of funny to think about the long hard road that it took to get to big budget, big screen adaptation of Spider-Man, because not just because of the character rights and legal issues, studios and all that, but there was this mindset from the studios that maybe it wouldn't be worth putting all this money into. Maybe people wouldn't flock to see it because I mean the Batman movies, they had come and gone. They'd overstayed their welcome. I think Batman and Robin, the Schumacher film, kind of put the nail in that coffin. Superman nowhere to be seen. But then you had kind of stuff like Blade in the late '90s, which was a big hit, and X-Men, which a lot of people credit as being, a game changer and something that really led the way in this superhero renaissance, and specifically to this Spider-Man adaptation. It did seem crazy at the time that we had the big guys. We had Batman, Superman. They were the big popular superhero movies, and Spider-Man was the logical next kind of big superhero movie. Everyone knew Spider-Man, right? But to get it onto the big screen probably would be a lot more complicated than something like Batman, something like Superman. Even like Superman, they accomplished very nicely back in the '70s the effects of Superman flying and that kind of stuff, which I don't know, maybe is a little more straightforward than what you would see with Spider-Man. He does, all these acrobatic and flamboyant moves, swinging around on his web and through the city, web slinging, all that kind of stuff. So it is complicated, and part of it, they kind of had to wait for the effects to at least be realistic, acceptable enough to pull something like that off. And I think at the time, I think they pulled it off pretty okay. I mean, some of the effects, looking back on them today, yeah, they're not perfect, but at the time, it was serviceable. It was fine. They did a fair enough job of accomplishing that with CGI when absolutely necessary, but a lot of in-camera stuff, a lot of great stunt work, and for the most part, it does blend together seamlessly enough, I guess you could say. Um, but that was one of the big challenges, obviously, and I guess if you want to call it a risk, then the risk paid off because obviously the movie was a huge hit. Again, it was more of a rarity to see a big superhero event movie like this. This came out uh, Memorial Day or Victoria Day if you're Canadian in May of 2002. I was there opening day. To date myself, I was in high school. I think it was my first year of high school when I went to see the movie. I actually had to stand in a line to get into the theater. Can you believe that? Oh my god, how times have changed. Oh, and here's the best part: the admission was $6. Can you fucking believe that? But yeah, it's a movie I've watched many times since then, and I don't know, maybe I get kind of a different reaction from myself each time I watch it. But for the most part, I enjoy the movie, and I would always say that over the years since it being released, and then obviously sequels to follow, more superhero movies in general to follow. My kind of stance on it was always, it's a good movie, but I always had to put the but Spider-Man 2 way better, much of an improvement, does everything, you know, so much better than this movie. So I mean, maybe kind of unfair to this movie, but it's a movie that is in some ways it's restricted by what's required of the plot and how maybe audiences weren't as open to the fantastical superhero worlds and all that, and they kind of have to make it, I don't know, at least in some way grounded in an acceptable way that audience, like general audiences, could buy. I mean, like everyone pretty much knows the Spider-Man origin, and this movie interprets it in its own way, in a pretty, I don't know, definitive way, I guess. I mean, we have Peter Parker. It's Tobey Maguire playing the role, who's great. He's a nerdy high school student. He's very bright, a genius, you could say, but awkward. Can't fit in. He has a crush on the girl next door, Mary Jane Watson, played by Kirsten Dunst, the wonderful and beautiful and crush of every 13-year-old at the time, Kirsten Dunst. He has his buddy, Harry Osborn, who's, always got his back. They have kind of an interesting, friendship going on. Uh, his Uncle Ben, his Aunt May, and Harry's father, Norman, who's kind of a father figure to him. We have all those characters kind of set up, and we have the plot where, they go on the school trip. There's genetically enhanced super spiders, and oh shucks, one of them just it gets away, and it bites Peter, and it transforms him into Spider-Man. Spider-Man, he can do whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies, and all this new kind of stuff, which you could almost say is like a puberty allegory. Obviously there's the scene in his room where he's first discovering, wow, I can shoot webs and stuff, and like Aunt May's like, what are you doing in there? He's like, no, I'm drinking Dr. Pepper, which is delicious, buy it. That kind of stuff. And the big plot point that everybody kind of knows about this origin, as memorable and iconic as something like the dark alleyway with Bruce Wayne as a kid and his parents getting mugged and shot and killed and all that. We have the plot of Peter Parker first trying out his Spider-Man gimmick, his outfit, his powers in the wrestling match. Uncle Ben, he's going to pick him up. Burglar, he rips off the wrestling match promoter, and he lets him go. And guess what? This guy, he shoots Uncle Ben. He kills him. And Peter feels this terrible guilt, and it causes him to kind of reassess what he's going to do with these powers. Because initially it was kind of for selfish reasons. He wanted to go to this, 3 minutes in the ring with Bonesaw match to win money to buy the car, to impress the girl, and all that. But now, in the wake of this tragedy, he realizes that with great power comes great responsibility, and that's the Spider-Man way. So that's kind of the main plot, and of course, simultaneously, the villain is created at the same time as the hero, which is it's kind of a good dynamic. And it's Norman Osborn, played by the great Willem Dafoe. He's testing out super soldier serums and his Green Goblin gliders and all other alliterative kind of comic book stuff. And he turns himself into a crazy psychopath who also has super strength, is seemingly more powerful than even Spider-Man is. So it makes for a good match. And obviously, I mean, when you look at the rogues gallery of all the Spider-Man villains, there's a lot that they could have gone with this first movie, but I think probably Green Goblin probably was the best bet, and I think a good choice for this movie. And at first, it's the Green Goblin just kind of getting revenge on all the people who wronged him within his company, trying to shut him down and stuff like that. Which is all, this is kind of interesting. It's good enough motivation, I guess, for a villain, and Willem Dafoe plays it great. He's absolutely wonderful. But then, yeah, it kind of turns on autopilot, where it's all about, oh, the villain just wants to do crazy things and, like, terrorize the city, and he wants to kill Spider-Man, and they gotta fight, and he, finds out his secret identity, and all that kind of stuff. So it does eventually go on sort of an autopilot with the plot, but I don't know, you almost kind of have to expect that, where it's basically first half origin, second half, let's do some fun action stuff, and it pulls it off fine. having seen it at the time, as a teenager, 13 years old, part of me was kind of, I don't know, hungry for something more, a little bit more mature and gritty, like some of the stuff that would follow, like Batman Begins. Obviously, that was a godsend, basically, in my eyes. And to see this movie, which it's Spider-Man, so it's a general audience kind of thing. It should be acceptable for the whole family. It is a little cheesy. It is a little goofy, and I don't know whether that works for you or not. It might entirely be up to what mood you may be in watching the movie. So maybe you have to be in the right mood for it. But watching it again recently, especially considering where we are right now with superhero movies and all that's changed and all that has come to be accepted of them, and all the new things that they're trying, all the great comic book plots and concepts that are really, really out of this world. This is definitely something a little more, by the numbers, basic, but there's an undeniable charm to it, which I think is why a lot of people go back to it and why it is still considered among the notable superhero movies of the last 20 years, I guess, right, of this renaissance that you could kind of argue maybe got started with stuff like Blade and X-Men and all that kind of stuff. At the time, I already was a pretty big fan of Sam Raimi. Had seen the Evil Dead trilogy countless times before this movie was released, and when I heard that Sam Raimi was going to be the director, I thought that was perfect, that was amazing. And well, obviously you're not going to get the crazy over-the-top violence of the Evil Dead movies in this movie. You certainly see the imagination and creativeness and great style that Sam Raimi is able to bring to a movie, which it is an impressively visual. It is impressive visually. This movie, I think it does feel very comic booky without going that Ang Lee route, where it's like making it look like comic book panels and stuff like that. There are some interesting scene transitions and dissolves and stuff like that, which is it's actually pretty. It's fun. I think it's pretty cool, and they don't overdo it too. But it is a movie first and foremost, and it feels like a movie, obviously. So there's all that, and you can definitely sense the Sam Raimi signature on all of it. I mean, I can't believe they got the car in the movie, the classic, which was Bruce Campbell's car in the Evil Dead movies. They make it Uncle Ben's car in this movie. How awesome is that? I'm still blown away by that. And of course, Bruce Campbell is in this movie. He's the ring announcer who actually names Spider-Man. He's going by the name, I'm the Human Spider, but knows, that's a stupid name, kid. The Amazing Spider-Man, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of cool. Cool to see all that Sam Raimi stuff, and that followed through with the trilogy as a whole. So I can't commend enough the choice of bringing Sam Raimi to this movie, who is a self-professed Spider-Man fan, and that shows within every moment of this movie. And of course, I do think Tobey Maguire is a really good choice as well as Spider-Man. He really kind of pulls off the nerdy aspect to it, which is great. I mean, some scenes are a little funny. Like, I don't know, it's just Tobey Maguire and how he is, but it's like sometimes it's like, is he asleep or something? Like in the middle of a scene where it's supposed to be like a tense scene, he's like, "Oh, I got clipped by a bike messenger." Oh, okay, cool. Little stuff like that, little cheesy stuff like. I think like the key words that will probably inevitably, just repeatedly be associated with this movie are goofy, cheesy, silly, things like that, which is fine if you're in the right mood for it. Which is not to say it's like a stupid kid movie or something like that, just because it is suitable, acceptable for all ages. I mean, there's some mature stuff, I guess. I mean, it's the thing about this trilogy. It is certainly a melodrama, right? So I mean, this almost kind of soap operatic aspects to it, which I think they do work for the most part, and I think with this huge superhero world and all these big action scenes and this incredible fantastical stuff, I do think they're able to kind of harness it within a story with characters that are properly motivated, I guess. I mean, obviously with Peter Parker and the whole Uncle Ben thing, of course, but with his relationships with others, like there's interesting dynamics with him and Harry. How they're really the only friends that each other has, because Peter, he's socially awkward, he's a nerd and stuff like that. He can't really fit in with other people. Harry, he's rich, going school to school. He doesn't fit in either because everyone kind of think, hey, rich boy, you think you're better than me, stuff like that. Show up in a Rolls Royce to the field trip, stuff like that. And the father relationship with Harry and Norman, and how it's not a good relationship, and there's this weird thing where Harry, he is, I don't know, he is jealous of the way his father sees Peter, right? Like like he almost wishes Peter were his son because he's the big genius scientist and Harry is not. But he looks to his friend Peter, he's like, oh, this guy's more like me than my son, right? And so there are a few scenes like that, like that dynamic between the characters, even like the graduation scene was really, it's just so terrible. He like goes up to his son like, well, son, you proved me wrong. I guess you graduated after all. You dumb fuck. um, oh, Peter, you got the science award. I'm so proud of you. You're great. Let me hug you, let me smell you a little bit. Stuff like that. But so in that kind of jealousy, Harry, he kind of puts the moves in on Mary Jane, right? Who he knows that Peter has the big crush on Mary Jane his whole life. So, in kind of a weird kind of revenge kind of way, that's kind of what he does, and he keeps it a secret from Peter, and she has to keep it a secret from him too. Don't tell Harry. That's kind of the key line of the movie that appears once from Mary Jane when she's working in a diner. It's something she would consider to be beneath what he seems acceptable, and then later on at the very end when Green Goblin is defeated, spoiler alert for that. And yeah, there is an interesting kind of dynamic, even like when like Peter does eventually find out, like when they get their apartment, he almost like kind of like, it's a weird thing, he offers Peter a job at Oscorp, almost as like this own kind of guilty offering, but Peter, he has to make his own way. He rejects this offer and stuff like this. This is a weird kind of dynamic of fathers and sons and boyfriends and girlfriends and this CW love triangle kind of stuff. But I don't know. I think they do it well. And the point of me talking about all this stupid shit is that I think the characters are properly motivated, because you have to have something dramatically between the characters and their conflicts outside of the big action set pieces to make it feel worth it. Like something's at stake. Not just in a very, very literal and obvious way of the Green Goblin holding the whole track of kids at the bridge in one hand and Mary Jane in the other. You gotta choose, stuff like that. Not just that, but characters and their motivations and how they play into each other and how they play into the bigger action stuff. So I think it's fair in how it presents its characters. I do think there is proper motivation. And obviously there are some good action scenes, some fun stuff. I mean, again, with the special effects, not all of it works perfectly, but I think it has some good standout scenes. I especially like the fight between Peter and Green Goblin at the very end. How they just kind of, I don't know, stumble into this abandoned building, whatever it is. I don't know if it's just an old church or cottage or something. I don't know what it is, but it's a good fight and it feels pretty intense. And again, because of everything backing the characters, in their so-called real lives instead of the superhero masks that they wear. I think it has an extra kind of punch to it, I guess. So I think it works great. And again, with the final closing line of "Don't tell Harry," I mean that just I think that puts everything together perfectly and sets up the sequel perfectly. Which again, I'll say the sequel is a lot better than this, but not to take away from this movie, which is pretty good. And good action, special effects, acting, really good casting. I mean, Toby, he's good. Willem Dafoe, I mean, he's great as the villain. Maybe a lot of people will mention that the Green Goblin suit, it isn't the best. Looks a little cheesy, a little goofy, a little silly. It's fine. It's okay. I mean, you look at some of the earlier test footage of like Goblin makeup that looks more like what we see in the comics. That would have been cool, really scary, terrifying, but nah, I think it's okay, and it makes this movie at least more distinctive with its own unique Goblin design. And Willem Dafoe, he sells every aspect of it. He's great in kind of the over the top stuff, but like even just as Norman Osborn, he's this great creep. Like the Thanksgiving scene, like when he first comes in and he meets Mary Jane, you see him like looking her up and down, and you just I gotta take a shower after that. It's so great. He's great in the movie. I think it was perfect casting for Willem Dafoe. The only casting that is perfecter than that would have to be, I mean, obviously, it's taken me this long to get to the crown jewel of Spider-Man, which is J.K. Simmons playing J. Jonah Jameson. Glorious casting, glorious performance, showstopper, scene stealer, just a thing of beauty. I can't praise his performance enough. It's like he just leapt from the comic pages and came to life. No doubt they just had to bring him back for the new continuity within the Disney owned Marvel Studios owned Spider-Man movies. They had to do it. He was just too good. He was too perfect. The other ones, the ones with Andrew Garfield, they couldn't even bother. They just couldn't. If they couldn't get him, why bother, right? So that's obvious. That's a testament to how incredible, how amazing he is. So nothing but praise and love for J. Jonah Jameson, played by J.K. Simmons. Overall, it stands up. It's a good movie. I really do. I mean, even in some people, like again, I've watched this movie countless times over certain intervals over time. I've always generally enjoyed it. Actually, watching it again most recently, I think I really enjoyed it a lot more, even more than previous times. I don't know. Maybe it's just there's a certain quaintness to it. I don't know, compared to what we see today. So there's always going to be room for the Raimi movies. I think people will continue to go back to them and enjoy them, and especially they're. It's a series you can knock off in three, maybe two. Maybe just watch the first two, I guess. Avoid the third one. It's not as huge of a universe as the Marvel movies are today, so you can just get a self-contained story within this trilogy, or even just within this one movie. Even though it does end on a cliffhanger, it still feels like things were resolved and everything kind of came together, and certain inequities were rectified. So all that, I enjoy it. I think it's good. I think ultimately it deserves better than to say it's good, but Spider-Man 2 is better. No, I think that's true, but I think it's a good movie on its own, and I enjoy it quite a bit. And obviously a lot of people do as well. It's still watched and enjoyed to this day, still counted among, some of the best superhero movies. Not to mention, I mean, like, this movie in and of itself is like this meme factory, right? Like, you see all these memes still, which brings a very interesting new kind of dimension to it, like with like the Star Wars prequels, right? So it'd be kind of interesting. They should actually do like midnight screenings of this trilogy, if they don't already. But what you see a lot of in revival theaters, that show older titles and stuff, at least what I've seen in some of the stuff locally, they'll do like interactive screenings. So you're encouraged to, do the Rocky Horror thing and, cheer along with the movie, go along with the lines, take out your phone and live tweet the movie, interactive screening kind of stuff. So I think they should do that for like Spider-Man. It'd be funny, like just to see like to be in a crowd, be in a crowded theater, and have everyone cheer at like a line as simple as like I'm something of a scientist myself. Imagine I could only imagine the eruption of cheers that a theater would go into just for that one line, which is funny. Uh, and then with the second movie, pizza time is the ultimate line. Pizza time. So yeah. Anyway, Spider-Man. This is a rambling review. Spider-Man, really good. I enjoy it. Sam Raimi, it's a legend. I think he did Spider-Man good. Toby, he did Spider-Man good. Kirsten Dunst, good Mary Jane. James Franco, good. Harry Osborn, Norman Osborn, Willem Dafoe, perfect. Cliff Robertson, Rosemary Harris, Uncle Ben, Aunt May, and the great, the one, the only, the amazing J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. So that's my review. Spider-Man. Check it out if you haven't seen it. It's pretty good. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll catch you again soon.